So in this lesson, we are going to learn how to multiply and divide fractions. By the end, you should be able to multiply fractions with and without mixed numbers and divide fractions with and without mixed numbers. If you know how to multiply, you know how to divide, okay? So you'll see that as we go along. Make sure you understand how the multiplying works. There are a few shortcuts along the way that some people will use. And you can use the shortcuts or you can do things the long way as well. Okay, so you can kind of choose what happens to work best for you. So to start, let's figure out what we need to do to multiply fractions. So when we multiply fractions, there's a couple things we have to make note of. And I'm just going to add a couple notes at the top here. One, no mixed numbers or mixed fractions. All right, so if you're not allowed mixed fractions, we're going to have to turn things into improper fractions if there's a whole number. Second, we'll multiply top. And the bottom. So you'll notice when you added, you only added the tops. With multiplying, we do both. We multiply the top and we multiply the bottom. And then third, you know what I'm going to say is the last thing you do, reduce. We'll reduce and go convert back to mixed numbers. I know it feels like there's a whole lot of extra steps because you can't have improper fractions and then you can't have mixed number fractions and then you have to go back to mixed number fractions, but that's just the way multiplying fractions work. So to start out, we have 7/8 times 3/4. So we don't have to worry about mixed fractions here because we don't have any. These are just common fractions. So we're going to start out multiplying the tops and the bottom. So we'll multiply the top together, 7 times 3. And then on the bottom, our new denominator is going to be 8 times 4. You wouldn't necessarily have to write out this middle step that way. I've just kind of added it in for you. Hopefully it makes it easier to see. 7 times 3 is 21. 8 times 4 gives me 32. I can't reduce those. There's no improper fraction here. We end up getting to stop at this stage. Okay, that's an easy one. Next one. There's two ways to do this. I'm going to give you both methods. Some of you will like the second way. Some of you will go, that's just way too confusing. That's fine. Use whatever's easiest for you. So multiply the top and multiply the bottom. 5 times 4 gives me 20 on the top. 8 times 7 gives me 56. I keep bumping something on my pen. So to get 20 and 56. Now you'll notice both of those are even numbers. Because both of those are even numbers, we can reduce. Okay? So I can divide 20 by 2 and 56 by 2. So let's start there. Okay, 20 divided by 2 leaves me with 10. And 56 divided by 2 is 28. I still have even numbers, so we've got to reduce a little bit further. Let's divide by 2 again. And we get 5, and 28 divided by 2 would give me 14. And now we're at lowest terms. We can't reduce any further. There is another way to do this question, so I'm just going to put a line across here because I don't want to get lost into the next question. And I'm going to write out the other way. So we'll call this the OR. So now we have 5/8 times 4 over 7. Now, multiplying, it doesn't matter what the order that we multiply in is. Would you agree with that? 5 times 4 is the same as 4 times 5. So this fraction set is actually equal to 4/8 times 5/7. It's going to give us the same fraction. Do you agree? I'm just changing the order of the numbers around. Now, if you saw 4/8 times 5/7, hopefully you would notice that here, that fraction is the same as a half. So this is the same as a half times 5/7, which is equal to 1 times 5 is 5, 2 times 7 is 14, so we reduced early. Now, this step is one that I don't usually write down, okay? I'll often not write those 2 steps down. I got a pesky fly bugging me here. So I'll show you what I do for note keeping, and we'll see another example of this come up in the next question as well. So I'm going to show you the other way for it. This is the one that sometimes people find a little bit confusing, but it's really not too bad. So I'm going to grab my green pen here, and we're going to reduce in the middle here. So usually what I do is I say, well, 4 over here can be divided by 2, and if I divide the top by 2, I have to divide the bottom by 2. 8 can be divided by 2. So I look at it, so I say, okay, let's divide this by 2, and let's take 8, and we're going to divide 8 by 2. And I'm going to write the just do some, like, hopefully this works for you. So 4 divided by 2 leaves me with 2. 8 divided by 2 leaves me with 4. So I get 5 times 2 and 4 times 7. That's going to leave me with this fraction here. I could have also said I can divide 4 by 4 and I can divide 8 by 4. And that will take us to our smallest fraction. So why don't I'm going to just do a little erasing here. I'm going to erase this whole section. And I'm going to write it out with kind of the canceling in the middle shown in shorthand notation. Now just remember, if you divide something on the top by 2, you need to divide something on the bottom by 2 as well, okay? It has to match. So let's go back to my pen, and I'm going to grab my red again. So we started out with 5/8 times 4/7. So look here and see, is there anything, we call it cancel, that would cancel out? Basically, is there something you can divide out on the top and divide out on the bottom? So we already said that we could divide both by 2. We also said we could divide by 4. I'm going to go with the 4 because it's bigger. Always pick the biggest one that you can think of. So 4 divided by 4 and 8 divided by 4. Okay? And I'm going to just rewrite the middle step for you because I think that will make it a little easier. So this makes it the same as 5 over 2 times 1 over 7, which is 5 times 1 is 5, 2 times 7 is 14. So that's kind of showing out how we do that canceling in the middle. You don't have to do that, but it can be helpful because I like multiplying with smaller numbers rather than larger numbers. Let's look at the next example. So let's look at this one. Now these are nice small numbers. So 3 times 2 is 6, 4 times 3 is 12. That gives us nice easy numbers, but let's say maybe they're not such easy numbers. I look at this and I say, what can I cancel out? Well, there's a 3 on the top and a 3 on the bottom. 3 can be divided by 3. So 3 divided by 3, and I can divide this one by 3. 4 and 2. I can divide both of those by 2. Let's write out our new fraction. 3 divided by 2 leaves me with 1. 3 divided by 3 leaves me with 1. 4 divided by 2 leaves me with 2. Times 2 divided by 2 is 1. 3 divided by 2 is 1. 1/2 times 1, because 1 over 1 is 1, leaves me with a half. So my fraction comes out already reduced. If we didn't do that, we'd have 3/4 or 3/4 times 2/3, which would be 6/12, and then we'd have to reduce that and get our half. Okay, so both of those methods work exactly the same way. One just looks for, can I reduce in the middle? Hopefully that doesn't get too confusing, but it is definitely helpful, especially if you have questions that have a lot of numbers in them or a little bit larger numbers, because sometimes it's harder to see where you can reduce with large numbers, but you can see it when the numbers are smaller. All right, let's move on to the next one. This one, we have 3 on the top, a 5 and a 2 on the bottom. I can't reduce any of those. 1 here, 1 doesn't get any smaller than 1. So this one is just going to stay as is. 3 times 1 leaves me with 3. 5 times 2 gives me with 10. So this one's just an easy 3 times. All right, so those are the easy scenarios. Now let's look what happened next. Oh, I got rules for you next, I guess. Fraction rule number 4. So our first few rules were you can't leave fractions improper. You always have to reduce fractions. When you're adding, you must adding or subtracting. You absolutely have to have a common denominator. Now, this is my rule for multiplying and dividing. Always, always, always convert mixed fractions or whole numbers into improper fractions. You have to do it. If you don't do it, you're going to be in trouble. All right? So this is really important to make note of. There is a summary of all the rules at the end anyway. All right. So now we have mixed numbers. Last slide says we can't keep mixed numbers. We have to make them improper. This is why you had to learn how to do improper fractions. So we're going to do that first, and then we're going to multiply. 4 times 4 plus 1. Okay? 4 times 4 is 16 plus 1 leaves me with 17 over 4. 2 times 4 is 8 plus 1 is 9 over 4. Now, if we look here, 17 doesn't get any smaller, 9 doesn't get any smaller, at least not with 4s in the bottom, so we just have to multiply exactly as it is. 4 times 4 leaves me with 16 as a new denominator, and 17 times 9 gives us 153. We have learned how to turn that back to a mixed number. So our 153 divided by 16 leaves me with 9.5625. So this is equal to 9 wholes. There's our whole number. And then we're going to take this fraction part and we're going to multiply it by our denominator to find out that fraction is equal to how many parts in the denominator. So 0.5625 times 16. Leaves me with 9. So we have 9 wholes and 9 sixteenths. So this gives me my numerator. Okay, and then this one gives me my wholes. Okay, hopefully that works out for you. The other way you could do it, you could say there's 9 wholes. 9 times 16 leaves you with 144. 153 minus 144 would also work. This is the part that's pesky. Now, at this point, we're going to do one more, and then I'm going to show you a little trick, okay? So 2 3/8 times 1 5/6. So 8 times 2 is 16, plus 3 leaves me with 19. 19 over 8 times 6 times 1 is 12, plus 5 leaves us with 17. Oh, just a second. I was thinking of 2. Just a sec. Let's back up. 6 times 1 is 6 plus 5. That works a little bit better. So times 11 over 6. Sorry, I was distracted trying to look at something else at the same time I was talking. That does not go over very well. So for this one, 19 times 11 is going to leave us with 209. 8 times 6 is 48. Now these ones get really messy. And because they get really messy, I am going to give you a calculator shortcut. That is if you're not using your phone. This is going to force you to go out and find a calculator, which you will need to have for your midterm, which is going to be coming up faster than you think. So when you're using your calculator, we're going to look for the fraction button. So I'm going to just make my video a little bit larger, and I'm going to hopefully be able to show you the calculator that I'm using. Yours might be a little bit different. Even if yours is a little bit different, you will have the same general buttons on it, okay? So this is my most favorite calculator I'm showing you. So this works way better than showing you my calculator because it actually shows in the right direction. So this is the particular calculator that's used for most of the math courses. I'll show two just because you may have another calculator. What I want you to look for is this button here. So the button is A, B over C, okay? That button is what we call a fraction button. So let's say I want to, and we don't have to have all three of them. You may just have B and C. So let's say we had our last fraction. So the last fraction we had up was 209 over 48, okay? That's not an easy one to turn to a mixed number. So in your calculator, we're going to have the calculator convert. So in the calculator, you're going to do 209. Then you're going to press the ABC button. And then you're going to press 48. And then I want you to press equals. Okay? So you're going to do 209. Press your ABC button. Now the calculator will show something like this. So the calculator display will show something like 209, a little kind of L. And then when you put your 48 in, then it will give you a 48. This is the same as your fraction line, okay? If you were to tell it that there was three pieces, an A, a B, and a C, it would put, your calculator will show something like this. It'll, whatever number you put in for A, it'll give a little L, then it'll do your B, a little L, and then C. It will always be in that order, all right? If there's nothing there for A, you don't have to put anything. If you only put two numbers in when you press the fraction button, it assumes that you're giving B and C. So when you put this in your calculator and then you press equals, you will find your calculator tells you 4, little L shape, 17, little L shape, 48. This number, if we go back, think about this. So think about that ABC, okay? So the A is 4, B is 17, and C is 48. It's already converting it for us, so it saves us some steps. On your midterm, I will expect you to show me some work for some basic examples, but for complex questions, this can be really helpful. And please, when you are doing your quizzes in SAM, it is important for you to make sure that they are properly put back into mixed numbers, and this will make the numbers so much easier because you'll get some really weird numbers, and it is perfectly okay to get weird numbers. That happens typically when you are doing multiplication and division. All right, so there's a little trick there. If you don't have this calculator, you might have this one. This is my most favorite calculator, but it's not the calculator that you use for block exam. Again, you'll see there's the ABC button. All right. And just as a little tip, you can use that ABC button and you can use adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing with it. So you can give it a shot and see what happens. You still have to know how to show your work the long way as if your calculator was broken. All right, so now we're back to the rest of our examples in your multiplication notes. So we're going to take this one, 209 over 48, we already put in, and we get 4 and 17 over 48. And you can use that calculator shortcut there. It's really, really, really useful. Next one, we have 6 and 5/8 times 2. So 8 times 6 is 48. 48 and 5 leaves me with 53 over 8 times. Now, in this case, when you see a 2, put a 1 underneath of it. 2 over 1, 2 divided by 1 is still 2. We're not allowed to keep whole numbers. Okay, so we have to turn everything into a fraction. So you're going to take your whole number and you put a 1 under it. You're always going to pick a 1 when you're multiplying, because we don't need that common denominator. It keeps it easy. Now, this is one where I would simplify in the middle, personally. I would look at this and go, well, 2 divided by 2 is 1. 8 divided by 2 is 4. So we can do that. Right? We do 1 on the top, 1 on the bottom. It's always going to be top-bottom pairs. And we're going to get 53 over 4 times 1 over 1. Well, that just means we have 53 over 4. 53 over 4 is equal to what reduced? 53 divided by 4 gives me 13.25. So we have 13 wholes, 0.25 is a quarter. Think about money. So 13 and a quarter. You can use your fraction button if you want to solve that one. A fraction button is going to be really, really handy, especially when you get to your quiz. The next one, 3 and 7/16 times 6. So we'll put the 1 under the 6 right at the start. 16 times 3 plus 7 gives us 55 over 16 times 6 over 1. Now this is another one. You'll see there's a top and bottom pair, ones that are both even. So let's divide both by 2. Okay, so this is going to be the same as 55 over 8 times 3 over 1. Okay, 55 times 3 leaves you with 165. 8 times 1 is 8 on the bottom. Go ahead and use the fraction button on your calculator if you want, but put it back to a mixed number, and as a mixed number we have 20 and 5/8. And that would be our final answer. All right, so that finishes off that little section. Now we need to figure out how to divide. So I said if you know how to multiply, you know how to divide. With fractions, you never, ever divide. It might say you're dividing, but we're going to turn all of our division to multiplication. That's how fractions work. Okay? So I should have had an extra slide, I guess, with some notes here. So when you divide, first, make improper. You're going to make improper fractions. Second, you're going to multiply by the reciprocal. C-I-P-R-O-C. I'm a terrible speller. I feel like I've spelled that wrong, but you'll have to just forgive me on that. I feel like there's missing a letter or an extra letter. My apologies. So you're going to multiply by the reciprocal of the second fraction. And I don't need to give you any extra multiplication steps because you've already multiplied. So let's start with our first one. So we have 4 3/4 divided by 2 1/4. So first of all, make them improper. So 4 times 4, 16 plus 3. So again, we have that 19 over 4 divided by 2 times 4 is 8 plus 1 is 9. So 19 over 4 divided by 9 over 4. So we've got the improper fraction done. We've got that step. Next, it says multiply by the reciprocal of the second fraction. One of my students told me, his teacher told them, kiss and flip. Think about X and O's, right? X, multiplication sign, and flip, because we're going to flip the second fraction. That's what reciprocal means. So we're going to take this 9/4 and we're going to flip it on its head. So this is the same as 19 over 4 times, flip this fraction around, 4 over 9. Okay? So 19 over 4 times 4 over 9. Now we could do reducing in the middle. You'll see here 4 on the bottom and a 4 on the top. If you have the same number on the top and as you do on the bottom, we can just cancel those two right out. They give us a 1. So we have 19 over 9. 19 over 9 leaves us with 2 1/9. Right? Nice and easy. Let's do the next one. So first we're going to make them improper. So 16 over 6 over 1 divided by 2 times 3 plus 1. 2 times 3 is 6. 6 plus 1 is 7 over 2. Then we have to do our flip. That's equal to 6 over 1 times, we're going to flip this one. It's always the second one that we flip. If you flip the first one, it won't work out the same way. So 2 over 7 No reducing we can do in the middle, so 6 times 2 is 12 over 7, which is the same as 1 and 5/7. 12 minus 7 leaves me with 5, so 1 and 5/7. Let's do another one. 4 times 2 plus 3, 8, and 3 is 11. 8 times 1 is 8, plus 3 happens to be 11. Okay, so we have 11 eighths, 11 quarters divided by 11, 11 eighths. And then we're going to do our flip. So 11 over 4 times 8 over 11. You'll notice if I change the sign, I have to change something else. So the fraction changes too. That is equal to, well, let's look. We're going to reduce in the middle here. We have to. There's 2 11s. The 11s can cancel out. One's on the top, one's on the bottom. And we are left with 8 on the top. So 1 times, we get like 1 times 8, so 8. And then 4 on the bottom, which is the same as 2. 8 divided by 4 is 2. You could have reduced a little further in the middle, I know that. If you reduced further in the middle and you just got a 2, that's good too. Next one, 1 3/8. Well, we already did that, so that was 11 over 8. Divided by 2, so we got to make the improper fraction, so 2 over 1. And, whoops, that's equal to 11 over 8 times 1 over 2. 11 times 1 is 11, 8 times 2 is 16. I had never thought of this before. My uncle, who is a trades guy, he said to me, he says, did anybody ever tell you the shortcut that if you want to divide a fraction by 2, just double the bottom number? And I kind of looked at him, like, I guess it does work. I had never thought about it being that simple. But that's because the 2 flips, and we end up with the 2 on the bottom. So it doubles the denominator. So if you want to take a fraction and divide it in half, let's say you have a quarter. Half of a quarter, think about your tape measure, you know is an eighth. Like the bottom number just doubles. Let's say you have 7/16, and you want to know what's half of 7/16. Let's double the bottom number, double the denominator. 16 double is 32. So if you have 7/16, and half of that would be 7/32. You can do that for any fraction at any time. It just has to be improper before you do it. Okay. So one of those little tips and tricks. I don't know if I admitted to him that it was a new way of thinking about it for me, but I thought, oh, what a brilliant way to think through it, and I'll often do it when sometimes I'll need a wrench for something and you're changing sizes, and it's funny because whenever I'm digging through my husband's toolbox, digging through, finding whatever size wrench I need for a project, that's one of the things I always think of. I always think of him telling me that if you have to split a fraction in half, just double the bottom number, because it is a nice little trick. Now you know why that trick works. Well, just a couple extra practice for division, and then there is a summary slide with all of your rules. If you think you're really good with this, jump through the worksheet. You don't have to work through all the practice, but you may find it helpful to have the little rule summary from the last slide in front of you while you're doing your practice. I would do some practice before you jump into SAM, just to make sure you're good. You will find some really ugly numbers show up in that SAM quiz. 8 times 5 is 40. Plus 1 gives me 41. 41 over 8 divided by 4 over 1. We're going to do our flip. 41 over 8 times 1 over 4. 41 times 1 gives me 41. 8 times 4 is 32. 41 minus 32 leaves us with 9. So we have one set of 32 and 9 30-seconds left. And that's as simple as that one's going to get. We have 12 and a half. 12 and a half is the same as 25 over 2 divided by 2 3/4. 4 times 2 is 8, plus 3 is 11 over 4. Let's do our flip. 25 over 2 times 4 over 11. Now this is a great spot to reduce in the middle. We have a 2 on the bottom that we can divide by 2, and we have a 4 that we can divide by 2. So this is the same as 25 over 1 times 2 over 11. This gives us 50 over 11, which is a little easier to simplify for us. If you know your 11 times tables, 11 times 4 is 44, so we're going to have 4. 50 minus 44 leaves me with 6 11ths. All right. 7 divided by 2 3/8. Now, when there's a 7 in front, we do turn it to an improper fraction, but it's not going to do the flip. So 7 over 1 divided by 8 times 2 is 16, plus 3 is 19 over 8. Do our flip. 7 over 1 times 8 over 19. 7 times 8 leaves me with 56. 1 times 19 is 19. And if you turn that back into a mixed number fraction, we get 2 and 18 over 19. Quite straightforward. Okay, the hardest part, I think the hardest part of multiplying and dividing is when you get these really weird fractions, like 56/19. It's just a weird fraction, and using your calculator button can really help with reducing those. Just make sure you know how to do a few simple ones if you're asked to show work for how you would put something back to a mixed number. So last piece, summary for multiplying and dividing fractions. So multiplying and dividing fractions, you do not need a common denominator. So don't do the extra work. If you make a common denominator, you're just going to reduce extra. So no common denominator for multiplying and dividing. It's a different family than adding and subtracting, different rules. Mixed number fractions have to be changed to improper fractions before you multiply or divide. That's essential. To multiply, multiply the numerators for the new numerator, multiply the denominators for the new denominator. To divide, fractions only multiply, so you multiply by the reciprocal of the second fraction. Reciprocal, just think of the flip. Reciprocal is the flip of the second fraction. And then once you're done, simplify. Lowest terms, and then as a mixed number. And that's all you need to know for multiplying and dividing. That should have you on really good track.